Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we're always talking everything college hoops. You can find it anywhere else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus, and we appreciate that. We just want to say a couple quick thank yous. Thank you to Spreaker for getting us out into your earbuds, into your speakers. Totally appreciate them pumping the podcast out. And we haven't said this in a while, but thank you to Bell Jar for the intro and outro music. That's been an important part of the podcast for almost 300 episodes. So we want to say thank you to Bell Jar. It was nice spending some time with Bell Jar recently out at a concert, viewing some live music with him. But Mike, really, right now, we're about to burn it down and it might take all night. I'm okay with a slow burn if you are. Like, let's break down some brackets for these people. What do you say?
We have waited all year. We did the preseason pods. We talked about All-Americans. We talked about preseason Final Fours. We processed teams. We dissected teams. We talked to beat reporters. We talked to college coaches. We had special guests on. And this entire path has led us to where we are right now, which is Gus is going to pick the bracket. Gus and I are on the quest for the perfect bracket, and we put time into this. We've number crunched. Gus is going to kick it off today. Tomorrow you'll get mine. I cannot wait. This is my favorite podcast, this one, because I don't do anything. I don't prep. I don't do anything. I sit here and I just listen to the knowledge you're going to drop on us, and I get to react. I cannot wait.
All right. Well, let's get the listeners that knowledge in their earbuds as quickly as possible. Listeners, I'm just going to try to tell you right now, I am not going to belabor anything. I'm going to try not to draw anything out. I'm going to try to go as quickly as possible so you can bust through your bracket and take some notes. I suggest pencil. So in case there's a mistake, you need to erase something and you have a second thought about something when you listen to Mike's podcast following this, or you hop over to the Action Network and you listen to those guys discuss a couple things. Pencil might be the move here.
So here we go, partner. I'm not influencing these picks. I may play devil's advocate with you on some. I may summarize them, but this is your show. This is your time. This is your moment. Here we go. Kick it off in the East bracket.
Very good. I'm going to say that I'm going to quickly take North Dakota. Since you like the playing game, I am just going to go right there. I think North Dakota is going to beat NC Central. Just taking a quick look at Ken Pom numbers. I love NC Central's big man inside, but I think North Dakota State is going to be a little bit more efficient on the offensive end. So give me them in a slight lean, and then give me Duke moving on. I think that the VCU injuries and roster limitations is going to limit them. I love them on the defensive end. I think they have unbelievable metrics on that end. I think they're schematic for stopping people is also really unique. But I'll tell you right now, Central Florida has a couple of things rolling for it right now, and you like to see the hot team coming in, so I'm going to go Central Florida right there. If we roll down to Mississippi State and Liberty, as much as I want to find a way for Liberty to get there, I can't get there. And I love Ben Howland and what he brings to the table as a multiple Final Four visitor as a coach, and I think that he has enough talent, more than enough talent, more than enough talent on this roster to win this opening round game and maybe even a couple of more games, depending on who you're going to listen to. But I like that Mississippi State matchup. And then I think if we just go down and finish up this little pod, Virginia Tech and St. Louis, I think St. Louis has absolutely 0% chance to win this game. If you're going to take one of the best bets in the bracket, money line or whatever, I think Virginia Tech is going to absolutely wax the floor. I think that they play a similar style of basketball, but I also think that Virginia Tech's athletes are superior. I think their coaching superior, and I think their execution is superior on both ends of the floor. So that's where I'm at. I got Duke, I got UCF, Mississippi State, and Virginia Tech in that top little pod of the East.
All right, so let's break it down. You have number 1 Duke, number 9 UCF, number 5 Mississippi State, number 4 Virginia Tech. So as you're going through on this bracket, my question is, are you assuming that Justin Robinson is totally healthy?
100% assuming he's going to be healthy. If he's going to tweet out that I'm back and we're cool, then if he plays 20 minutes, I'm good. If he plays 25 minutes the next game, I'm even better. So I think that his impact doesn't need to be in the scoring column. I think it needs to be in pace of play and control of the offense and maybe be a little bit of a menace on the defensive end. If he gives us 20 minutes of that, I'm really cool with that. But yes, I'm under the impression that he is back for Virginia Tech.
Also curious, what's your thoughts on Marcus Evans of VCU? He plays, but he's limited, or what do you think there?
You know what? I think he's going to give it. Of course, you're going to get out there and play. Like you're not going to be the guy that's going to be like, I'm going to sit this one out. He's an unbelievably huge factor on both ends of the floor, defensive end and offensive end for VCU. If he's fully healthy, I think this game maybe has a different result in my book, but because that is a question mark and something that's in the uncertainty category, I'm going to lean with the things that we know, Taco Fall, and Dawkins and making some threes and Fall being an unbelievable presence on the defensive end.
All right. Bottom part of the East bracket. Go ahead.
All right. So I'm going to kick Belmont through. I'm kind of on the train here. I think that, Coach Rick Byrd needs a win here. And I think he's going to get it in the opening round against Temple. As much as we want to see Fran Dunphy go out on a high note, I think just getting to the tournament and getting an invite in the playing game in Dayton is a high note. But I tell you what, that's one of the better coaching matchups we're going to see in this tournament between those two coaches. I think that's really intriguing. But moving forward, if Belmont is going to play Maryland, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to push Belmont through. I'm going to put Belmont through for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think the big man is healthy. I think he's going to play. So if he plays, that actually matches up decently with Maryland's bigs up front. And I think that even though Maryland might have more elite athletes, I think that Belmont's efficiency on the offensive end wins out here. And I think that maybe taking care of the ball, making good twos, making long threes is going to be something that gives Maryland trouble. So I'm going to push Belmont through there. As far as LSU and Yale, I know that we're on the opposite end of the boat here. Listen, LSU is in a little bit disarray, and we saw this last year. And the illustrations I'll use last year are very simply are Michigan State, are Arizona, and those two spots were spots where you're like, oh, well, both of these teams can make a Final Four last year. And both of those teams went out much earlier than expected. And that's because they had the FBI fog surrounding them. They had uncertainty around their program. They did not have the normal, the normal schedule. And they had a lot of static surrounding their program. And if you look at LSU's program right now, that's a lot of static surrounding that. So I'm going to take Yale in the upset there. You look for one of these every bracket. I think that's where I found it. Here's why I like Yale. They're not going to be afraid to get up and down. They're going to score with LSU. LSU may or may not defend, depending on how they feel that day. And if they don't defend, guess what? Yale's going to make a whole bunch of shots. I'm not saying Yale's going to shut down LSU, but I could see this game being like 92-86. And I can see Yale coming out on top with a couple of three-pointers, especially if Copeland and Swain hit Copeland with his pull-up game, and Swain hitting a couple from deep. I could totally see that happening. Louisville and Minnesota, this is another one of these games where I feel really strongly about. I feel like Louisville has a great chance here, and I don't think the Patino thing is really going to play a huge role. I think it's going to be a big storyline, but I think Chris Mack is just going to be the superior coach here, and I think that's going to be a superior program. And I like Michigan State getting by Bradley. I know Bradley's going to jack a bunch of threes, but I don't think Michigan State is going to get knocked out there. I don't think that's their spot. So I'll say Belmont, Yale, so you have a little madness right there in the middle of the bracket, and then Louisville and Michigan State.
All right, curious here. First of all, I like it. You got a couple upsets there. You got 11-14. I certainly like that. Now, right. I'm curious, Yale. So let me play devil's advocate. If Will Wade was back and had never been suspended, would you feel differently?
Different, yeah, different. I think it would be silly not to use the evidence that we have from last year's tournament and apply it to this year's tournament. I think it'd just be silly to not apply that evidence and that knowledge that we have. We saw that Michigan State totally got tripped up against Syracuse and shot whatever it was from three against that Syracuse zone. And you can blame it on whatever you want. You can blame it on the Syracuse zone. You can blame it on the ancillary static that they had. And of course you can look at the Buffalo, Arizona matchup. And I think it'd be silly not to use some of that knowledge here in this particular matchup, especially because LSU's coach is under fire.
And your rationale for why Yale loses at home to Columbia by 8, loses away at Penn, and almost blows the Princeton game is what?
I'm going to tell you right now. The team can score. I'm not saying they can defend. I'm not saying they can defend in a crucial situation. All those situations that you just mentioned were places where they needed to get a stop in a crucial spot. I don't know if that's the situation that's going to unroll itself here against LSU. They just might need to make a whole bunch of shots, and that's something that they can do. And when you have a distinct characteristic, like we can make a whole bunch of shots, and we have an NBA player and maybe a couple of other quasi-pros, Like, we're not going to get scared out of the gym. Like, I'm okay with picking Yale here, and I know that we were kind of on Harvard early, but I think that they're going to hang, and in fact, I think they're going to hang and win.
Get it. So you think Yale's going to be on fire, which they certainly can be. They have a very strong offense. And you think LSU is going to be out of sorts and got exposed a little bit, and you think Yale's offense will be better than LSU's.
I think so. And why not go with, why not go with even more recent history? Why not just go back a couple of years where Yale upset Baylor and, we were all asking questions and scratching our heads then. How did this happen? It could be the same scenario.
Got it. Fair enough. Okay. So he's got 11 verse 14, 7 verse 2. Let's go to the top part of the bracket. Duke, UCF, Mississippi State, Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I think Duke gets through here. I think this is going to be one of those games where the first half is a little bit more interesting than you think, and then it follows suit to like the St. John's game where they end up winning by 30 or something of that nature. So I think that's kind of an easy one. The Mississippi State-Virginia Tech game is really tough for me. I had a tough time figuring this out. I'm sure you did as well. And this is a total Justin Robinson is kind of completely healthy lean here. And if I wasn't leaning that way, I might go Mississippi State. So I'm going to push Virginia Tech through here. And this is we all make guesses. And this is one of the guesses where I think the kind of back to back here, he's going to be okay. So I have Duke and Virginia Tech kind of an all ACC top of the East bracket there.
Bottom, Belmont, Yale, Louisville, Michigan State.
Let's go Yale one more time, and let's go Michigan State over Louisville. I think Michigan State rights the ship against the early season loss against Louisville, and they figure a couple of things out there. And then you have an Ivy team in the Sweet 16, and how great would that game be of Belmont and Yale? Everybody would be on top of that. I think here, the talent level of Yale is actually like slightly greater than Belmont's in some strange way. So, and plus you want a good story. You want your upset to get through. This is one of my upsets to get through. So I've been on the Ivy all year. We've been kind of irrational about it. So I'm going to stick with my irrational thinking here, and I'm going to push Yale through to the Sweet 16. They're a second weekend team, and the Ivy is represented in the Sweet 16.
And on the bottom, Louisville, Michigan State.
I think Michigan State gets through here, and I think they right the wrong that was done earlier this year where Louisville got that kind of surprising win early on in the season. I think Izzo figures it out. I think that also Chris Mack is limited, and maybe this is one of those things where we revisit some of Louisville's recent history in the ACC where they have trouble closing a game. I can see this being a close game, and maybe Michigan State and Cassius Winston closes it a little bit better than Louisville does.
Which means that we are now going to the Elite Eight battles to get to the Elite Eight. Duke, Virginia Tech, Yale, Michigan State.
Okay, listen, I'm going to say I'm paying attention to history here. I know no Zion. I understand. But if we just go back, Virginia Tech beat Duke 72-70. This is not a strange or odd or upsetting thing to happen. It's already happened this season. So if we're going to go somewhere a little bit off the radar, this is where I'm going a little bit off the radar. I'm going to take Tech revisiting the success that they had early on in the season in the ACC and taking down Duke maybe to a similar score. And maybe this is the part where Duke runs into trouble shooting their threes and shooting their foul shots. We know they have trouble shooting from three, and we saw that RJ Barrett had trouble shooting from the foul line in a late game situation against UNC. Maybe that's where this comes back to bite them, and they fall a little short of their long-term goals. So I'm going to take the slight upset here and go Virginia Tech moving on against the number 1 seed Duke.
And Yale, Michigan State.
I'm going to push Michigan State through here. I think this is where the joyride ends for the Ivy League. And look, if we're going to get an Ivy League into the Sweet 16, I think it's a great story for everybody. I think Cassius Winston's the best player on the floor, and I think that he finds a way to navigate through this and get to the Elite Eight. And again, I think Michigan State's playing with a little bit of freedom. One of the teams that we mentioned last year that was playing with so much like static and ancillary busyness behind the program, Michigan State had a boatload of this. And you couldn't get away from it. You feel the freedom that they're playing with right now, and I think that freedom yields an Elite Eight appearance for Spartan.
All right, and then go to the Final Four. Number 4, Virginia Tech. Number 2, Michigan State.
Look, Buzz is going to get it done, and you know why he's going to get it done? He's going to get it done because I think Justin Robinson might just play Cassius Winston to a standstill, and I think if we look at the supporting cast of Virginia Tech and Michigan State, I think everybody would lean I think everybody would lean Virginia Tech. I think we would go shooters, they'll go defenders. They might defend a little bit better on the perimeter. And listen, Buzz has done this before with Marquette. He made an Elite Eight with Marquette. It's not like he doesn't know how to build a program, and then once he builds the program, build off that success of the program. So this is like my one surprise Final Four pick. I'm going to take Virginia Tech to make the Final Four.
The Hokies through. That's a 4 seed. I like it. I like the upsets. Very realistic. I love the rationale there. Moving down to the West. Let's start at the top bracket. Talk to me, Goose.
Okay, as much as I want to pick Fairleigh Dickinson because we're from Jersey, I'm going to go with Prairie View A&M. Prairie View A&M is a school that's 140 years old. They are part of the Texas A&M staple of wonderful schools in Texas, and I'm just going to go with longevity there. I know we want to go with a Harvard on the hack and sack with Fairleigh Dickinson for hometown, but I'm going to go with Prairie View A&M there, and then I think they're going to eventually drop to Gonzaga. So give me Gonzaga pushing through. As far as the crazy zone matchup, I'm going to go with Syracuse just because I think Tyus Battle is by far the best player on the floor, and if you're looking for a player to make tough twos against the zone, who else do you want besides Tyus Battle? So I'm going to go with Syracuse defeating Baylor, even though Baylor has an unbelievable season due to their roster limitations and injuries. Coach Drew has done an unbelievable job just getting his team to this point. But I'm going to take Coach Boeheim there. And then as far as Marquette and Murray State, I mean, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me with this matchup of Marcus Howard and John Morant? Here's going to be the difference. The difference here is going to be Shaq Buchanan. Shaq Buchanan was the Defensive Player of the Year. He is going to shut down or at least limit, maybe effort Marcus Howard. Marcus Howard is a little bit compromised injury-wise, and I think he's going to give him real trouble on the perimeter, and I think that trouble is going to limit Marquette. We talked about Marquette having trouble with length and athleticism on the wing. That's exactly what Murray State has. I'm going to go with the upset here, slight upset. I'm going to push Murray State through. And as far as Florida State and Vermont, as much as I want to find a way for Vermont to get here, as much as I know the Catamounts are going to be in full force in Hartford, Connecticut, and that place is going to be green and yellow beyond belief, I want to get there for Anthony Lamb. I want to get there for the brothers Duncan. I want to get there for Coach Becker. I can't. Florida State gets through. So I have Gonzaga, Syracuse, Murray State, and Florida State in that top pod.
Interesting. Murray State going through against Marquette, so you're going with the Marquette slide, which I saw in person. Mm-hmm. I think people are selling Vermont a little short, but I'm in.
Listen.
So would you take Vermont in the points?
Absolutely 100%. Okay. How about that?
Cool. All right.
So let's go down to Buffalo, Arizona State, St. John's. Here's where I'm going to lean with the Arizona State St. John's game. Arizona State was in this situation not a year ago. They were in the playing game against Syracuse and then, totally spit the bit. I think they figure it out and get past St. John's. And we've talked about it on the podcast before where St. John's and Coach Mullen were kind of telling with what they didn't say in their post-game comments of like, we need a break from each other. I think the kids need a break from the coaching staff. The coaching staff needs a break from each other too. I don't know if that's maybe a rallying cry or maybe that's just like we're kind of done with the season. So I'm going to take Lucas Dort and Arizona State to get through there and face Buffalo. And I think the CJ Massenberg, Lucas Dort matchup is going to be totally phenomenal, but I'm going to push Buffalo through. I'm kind of with you on the Buffalo train there. Texas Tech and Northern Kentucky, love the Norse. I think McDonald is a really interesting player. He can shoot it. He can rebound it. I think he's one of the more underrated players in this particular bracket, but I'm going to put Texas Tech through due to their defensive high quality and Culver being the best player on the floor. Downstairs, I know I'm going against what you said here, but I feel strangely different here. I like that nobody is picking Nevada. I like that they're kind of getting undersold. I'm going to go with the Wolfpack here over Florida. And then as far as the saucy, is there going to be a top team that gets upset? I think the best place to look might be Michigan, Montana. Montana has all of that, high level talent that has transferred in, led by Rory and all of those seniors, Gwynn. So I think if you're looking for one place to find that upset against a team that might not be playing really well on the offensive end, I think that Michigan-Montana game might be a place to look, but I can't get there. I gotta go with Michigan. I gotta go with how well they're gonna play defensively. Even if they're not making their threes, they're still probably gonna win a 58-54 game against Montana. So I have Buffalo, Texas Tech, the Wolfpack of Nevada, and Michigan pushing through.
All right. So you have the upset of Murray State over Marquette, and everything else is straightforward. So let's go to your who's going to get to the Sweet 16. Number 1, Gonzaga. Number 8, Syracuse.
Okay, so I think that Gonzaga had a great test, and we've talked about this on the podcast with Washington and their zone. And yes, did they need a Josh Perkins run full court pass to Rui miracle shot to beat Washington? Yes, they did. But will they be well prepared? Do you think Coach Few is not preparing for some sort of zone right now? In pregame, I think he is. I think they'll do okay with it. Will the game be closer than you think? Absolutely. Will it be a little bit low scoring than you think? Yes, absolutely. And here's the other part about Gonzaga that maybe we get underrated and not paying close attention to. We've talked about this on the podcast before as well. They're playing an unbelievably efficient brand of offensive basketball that hasn't been seen it's only been touched by a couple of teams. It's touched by, the national champs last year in Villanova. We mentioned that Chris Paul team with Wake Forest. We mentioned that, Wisconsin team that had Frank Kaminsky and Sam Decker on it. That's the type of offensive efficiency that they're playing with. Their numbers are down slightly the last couple of games, but I think they're going to find enough creases in that Syracuse zone. And then as far as Murray State and Florida, as much as you'd like to see John Morant move on, I think it's just Florida State moving on, and they've proven it that they can kind of hang with anybody. And I don't think John Morant and what Murray State can bring is going to scare them at all. So I think that we have a Gonzaga Florida State rematch there. And let's go down to the bottom as far as Buffalo and Texas Tech. Look, I'm going to ride your Bulls here. You're on this preseason, and I'm just kind of going to ride your coattails here. I'm with you with what they can do defensively. I think this is actually a pretty standstill matchup defensively, and I think Buffalo has more weapons offensively. Perkins off the bench, CJ Massenberg, and to be honest, I think that Culver actually matches up just fine with Harris on the wing. And I don't think either one of those guys is going to outplay each other, and I think they'll play each other to a standstill. So I'm going to say give me a couple of more offensive options for Buffalo on the offensive end. Give me Buffalo. And here's the little surprise. We'll give a little nugget. We'll throw a little love. I think Nevada might actually take out Michigan because it could be a low-scoring game because Michigan isn't playing great on the offensive end. So I'm going to go with a slight upset there, and I'm going to go with make this kind of like a mid-major darling Sweet 16 with Gonzaga, Buffalo, and Nevada. I'm gonna put all of those guys through.
All right, here's my question on Nevada. So I think a lot of this from what you said is that they came back to not go out like this, that they came back with a purpose. Sure, my question would be, devil's advocate,
yes.
You admit, and I think you agree with me, that I really haven't played as well or as efficiently as we thought all year.
Totally.
So why now? Why not against San Diego State, who they never beat? Why not against at New Mexico, where they had a big deficit the year before? Why not in the Mountain West tournament where they lost again to San Diego State with Carolina? Like, what I'm saying is, why will it click now when it really hasn't clicked this season?
Why hasn't the urgency kicked in those moments?
Yeah,
right?
basically, right. That's my point. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, it's real now. The finish line is there. The finish line for these guys is a reality right now. And they know that any game that they lose from here on out, that's their legacy. I think that's meaningful. I mean, think about it as ourselves, as former, Division I college student athletes. You knew when the end was coming. You knew that you wanted to go out on a high note. You knew that you did not want to go out like that, quote unquote. I don't think they want to go out like that. I mean, and we can call Coach Muss for his coaching or his not coaching with the clipboard. We can call out their questionable shot making. We can call out their questionable decision making in crunch time. I think when push comes to shove against Florida, I think it's going to happen the last 3 minutes. And I think when they find themselves in a competitive game against Michigan, they're going to be like, oh yeah, you know what? We can win this game. Let's go win this game. And really, what's wrong with picking 3, 4, 5 fifth-year seniors in the tournament? Isn't that what we want to do? Isn't that what we want it? We want to trust seniors. So that's where I'm leaning with that. If no other reason, I'm trusting senior leadership there and trusting what they've invested in the program.
Got it. Well, then we're going to your Elite Eight. You got number 1, Gonzaga, number 4, Florida State.
I think they get the rematch here. I think they're annoyed. I think they knew they had a shot last year. I think they were compromised due to the Tilly injury. I think they come back and get it right on this end. I think it's an unbelievably close game, unlike the game last season. And I think they totally take advantage of the rematch here. And I think Tilly makes a difference. And I'll tell you right now, Crandall's a pain in tuchus on the defensive end. Crandall's not going to let them get into easy offense. Will they get some early offensive rebounds? Yes. But will they get them with the same frequency that they're used to getting them? No, not with Clark and Rui. And I think that's the difference there. I think the boards play a huge role here, and I think that the combination of Tilly, Rui, and Clark really disable Florida State and what they want to do on the offensive end, especially on the offensive rebounding end. So I'm going to push Gonzaga through to the Elite Eight.
And the bottom 6, Buffalo, 7, Nevada, 2 teams that we, at the beginning of the year, loved. Yep.
And listen, the love isn't going away. They're both in the Sweet 16. I'm going to push Buffalo through. I'm kind of with you here as far as where Nate Oates is at with this program. The depth that he has coming off the bench. I mean, Carruthers is an unbelievable pain in the neck on the defensive end. He's actually playing well offensively now. So I think that they get through, and I think it's going to be one of those matchups that everybody kind of attaches to and really gets married to. If this matchup actually happens, I can see a lot of eyeballs on this game. So I have Gonzaga and Buffalo.
And who do you got going to the Final Four?
No, Gonzaga. Let's go. I'm not getting off this train. The reason I'm not getting off this train is because of the offensive efficiency. I know that Buffalo's going to pack it in. I know they're going to limit them opportunities in the lane. Gonzaga can shoot the 3, they can shoot good 2s, and they'll get easy touches. And they remind me of UNC a couple of years ago, where they can get some offensive rebounds and get a few additional offensive opportunities that other teams don't normally get because of the athletes that they play up front. So I have Virginia Tech up top in the Final Four, and we're going to go Zags down low in the West Final Four.
Excellent job. Moving over to the South, top of the region, Virginia, Gardner-Webb.
Love Gardner-Webb. Love Virginia a whole lot more. So let's go to Ole Miss and Oklahoma. Look, if Oklahoma couldn't get through the first round in URI last year with Trae Young, who's, we can make an argument for him being Rookie of the Year.
That's a good point. Boy, is that a good point. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can make an argument for him Rookie of the Year in the NBA because he's playing out of his head right now, put up crazy numbers. How in the world are they going to get past Davis and Coach Kermit for Ole Miss? There's no chance. I don't think there's any shot. I think Oklahoma is unbelievably similar to Baylor in this regard. It's amazing they're in the tournament. Stop. End of sentence. Congratulations. That is an unbelievable job by Coach Kruger. I cannot believe that this team is in the tournament. Guess what? Quick exit. They're out. Ole Miss moves on. Wisconsin and Oregon. I know that Oregon's favored. I know that we talked about this a little bit earlier. When we were talking to one of our patrons. For whatever reason, I want to lean Wisconsin here. Maybe I'm just a contrarian and want to go the other way and try to find something different. I'm going to go Wisconsin. And look, I'm on UC Irvine. I'm on this game. I love the Anteaters. Go Big West. Max Hazard is an issue. If he plays as well as he did in the Big West final, then forget it. He was making threes. He was shot creating. That team is dangerous on the defensive end. And if they're making their threes, look out. I can totally see this game getting away from Kansas State. How about that? Not even it staying close. I can see it getting away from them. So I have UVA, Ole Miss. I'll go with Whiskey, and I'm going to go with the Anteaters with the upset, the 4-13.
1-8, 5-13, and to the bottom part of the bracket.
I'm with you. I know I heard you talk about this with Stuckey on the Action Network. I kind of like the St. Mary's move here. Here's why I like the St. Mary's move. If you're going to go with best player on the floor, guess what? The best player on the floor belongs to St. Mary's. It's Jordan Ford. He is by far the best player on the floor. His floater game is possibly better than Alex Copeland's from Yale. His floater game and his creativity in the lane is kind of Carson Edwards-like, who he might see in the next round. That's how creative and crafty he is with the ball. Fitz is an issue on the wing. We saw, saw what Jordan can do as far as, just a blocker and a mover and a rebounder and a shot deflector down low. So I think if you're going to go best player on the floor, it just might be Jordan Ford. And I think that Villanova, this just might be one of these times where, hey, they're just not as good as they were. And if they start jacking a whole bunch of threes against St. Mary's and not hitting, then St. Mary's is really going to value those possessions and take good care of the ball. I could see this being a low-scoring game and Villanova really getting desperate late-game situations. So I'm with you on St. Mary's. I'm going to go with Purdue over Old Dominion. Look, Coach Jones is an unbelievable story for Old Dominion. They played unbelievably well against Western Kentucky in the Conference USA tournament. But let's go. Possibly, you could argue like one of the best players in the tournament, Carson Edwards. Love what Purdue is doing with their ancillary players. So I'm going to push Purdue through. Cincinnati, Iowa, like, isn't this one of the easiest picks that we've had? Like, doesn't this just seem really easy for everybody? Like, just give me Cincinnati, move on. And as far as Tennessee and Colgate, as much as we want to make, some sort of like, toothbrush joke here, Colgate's actually played really well. They've shot the ball really well. Their metrics are decent. What I'm going to say about Tennessee is they're just bigger, tougher, stronger, and better. I don't think that this is the 2-15 upset that you want to go for. So I'm going to have St. Mary's, Purdue, Cincinnati, and Tennessee.
Going to the top to make the Sweet 16, kick it off with UVA, Mississippi.
I think it's easy here. I think UVA has one of the easiest paths to the Final Four of any of the teams that we're going to talk about, whether it be a 1, 2, or 3 seed. So I'm going to push UVA through against Ole Miss. As much as I love what Coach Kermit is doing with Ole Miss and what they're doing on the perimeter, I think they meet their match here, and I think this game kind of gets ugly in the second half. So I'm going to push UVA through. And here's my other little surprise. I'm going to pick the Anteaters to take out Whiskey and make the Sweet 16. That's my other like kind of little nugget upset where you're looking for your double-digit team to make that Sweet 16. I got Yale on the other side in the East, and I'm going to go Anteaters on the South up top to play UVA. I think Purdue and Carson Edwards is a little too much for Jordan Ford. As much love as we gave for Jordan Ford in the Villanova matchup, I think Carson Edwards is superior to him, and I think the surrounding cast around Purdue and Coach Painter, I think actually gets it done. And I think this is one of those situations where you're like, hey, wait, how is Purdue better when they've lost 4 seniors? And I think we ask that question and try to figure that out after they beat St. Mary's and get to the Sweet 16. And here's my other little saucy one. Listen, this game is in Columbus, Ohio. If you have Cincinnati and Tennessee playing in Columbus, Ohio, that place is going to be bananas and all Bearcats. And I think Tennessee runs into kind of the same problem they did last year early in the tournament, and Cincinnati rights the wrong that they ran into last year early on in the tournament. And I think Cincinnati moves on, makes a Sweet 16, and this is kind of like one of those wins that Mick Cronin can kind of hang his hat on and be like, yeah, we beat the team that was ranked number 1 in the country earlier this season to get to the Sweet 16. So I have UVA, the Anteaters, Purdue, and Cincinnati into the Sweet 16 in the South.
Okay, so now we're going to the Elite 8. Number 1, UVA versus the huge upset here, the Cinderella 13 seed UC Irvine Anteaters.
This is where it ends. You want to see like the story continue, but again, easiest path. I think UVA moves on easily here. And as far as the Purdue-Cincinnati game, this was a tough one. I kind of struggled with this whole little pod down here of what to do with everybody. I'm going to push Carson Edwards through. Maybe this is me just trying to get it right from last season when I was all in on the Purdue train and we argued Purdue or Michigan who would be better the whole entire season. But I'm going to push Purdue through to the Elite 8 here, and I'm going to go with best player on the floor, slight edge over Jaron Cumberland. I think Kane Broom actually plays a role here. I think that he actually impacts this game at some point. But I think that if we're going to lean one way, I think we go Coach Painter, and he makes an Elite 8 and kind of proves that, like, hey, I can do this with only one guy. I don't need all of these seniors. And Carson Edwards just proves to the world, like, hey, I'm one of the best players on the planet, and here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to carry my team to the Elite 8.
Okay, and then UVA versus the Boilermakers from Purdue. Who goes to the Final Four?
Too much length, too much defensive mechanisms for UVA. I think that Carson Edwards finally runs into something he can't handle. I don't think there's enough other scoring around him. I think it's a low-scoring game, maybe in the 60s, and I think UVA squeaks it out. And the Tony Bennett Redemption Tour finds its final stop, and it gets to Minneapolis just like we predicted preseason. And this UVA team finally makes the Final Four, and Coach Bennett finally makes the Final Four, and gets the unneeded and unnecessary redemption that he needs for his coaching career, because he is one of the great coaches in our sport.
All right, UVA's in with Gonzaga and Virginia Tech, and let's go to the Midwest, your last bracket.
Okay, so we're going to just go UNC and Iona. I hope this game goes up and down. I hope both teams score 90 points. But let's go UNC. Totally rooted. I love Coach Clueless. He does a great job. He's going to have his team ready to run up and down, but I don't know if he's going to have his team ready to defend. I can see this, maybe take a look at the over on this game. That would be a way to go. And this next game, Mike, and we've talked about this a little bit on the pod. We both had our eyes on both Utah State and Washington, and this is one of those games where you're just like, oh man, why are these two teams matched up against one another? Because you kind of had ideas, or you had a theory, or you had a hypothesis that maybe one of these two teams could do something, whether it be make a Sweet 16 or a Final Four run or whatever it is, and now they're matched up against each other. Like we mentioned earlier, this could be similar to the Dayton-Wichita State matchup from a couple of years back. Where you had Dayton can make some noise, Wichita State can make some noise, and they play each other in the first round, and you're just like, oh man, I can't pick either one of these guys. I can't make up my mind. I'm gonna go Washington here. I'm gonna go with Jalen Noel. I think that he plays closer here. I think he plays closer, maybe a little bit better than Merrill, and I think that guard matchup is kind of one of the best guard matchups. It's just literally a snippet below John Morant and Marcus Howard as far as guard matchups go in the opening round. But I'll go Washington there. Auburn, New Mexico State. I feel like Auburn, New Mexico State might be one of those trendy picks because New Mexico State has that 30 number next to their win total. But I think it's going to be Auburn. I think it's going to be Auburn big, as much as New Mexico State is not going to get run out of the gym because of their crazy 14-man rotation. I think the second half gets away from them. And Kansas Northeastern, I'm not all the way there with the Northeastern upset, so I'm going to push Kansas through, but just this one game. And I think they get one here. As much as I want to represent the CAA, being a former CAA student college athlete, I want to root for Northeastern here, but I can't find a way. I could see it happening, but I'm going to lean Kansas. So that's where I'm at the top part of that pot.
Bottom part of the Midwest, the last bracket.
It's totally irrational. My love for Iowa State is completely irrational, and it will continue here. I'm going to pick them over Ohio State. I'm going to pick them over the Buckeyes. I think that their perimeter talent is superior. I think Ohio State is kind of living on a little bit of borrowed time, even though Wesson is back. I could see him giving a little bit of trouble inside. Maybe Lard can eliminate that a little bit. But I'm going to go Iowa State, and I think their perimeter talent, Wigginton can go off at any time. I'm going to take him off the bench, give me 20 from him, and I think we're good. Maybe Shayok gets his act together on the offensive end and doesn't have one of those games like he had earlier in the season against the Big 12 where he just couldn't find the bottom of the bucket. So if they can have both of those guards go off along with, THT, and Halliburton, I think that makes sense. Houston and Georgia State, as much as I love Simons and you want to pitch Georgia State, there's no chance that they have in this game. I think Houston is going to absolutely destroy them and wreck them in the second half. So I'm going to go Houston there. Look, Wofford at Seton Hall, that's one of our favorite games. Of course I'm going to go the Terriers there. And then as far as Kentucky and Abilene Christian is a great story. When we talked to Brian Mull, he mentioned them as one of the teams that could actually represent and pop out, and he was absolutely right there. But I think the story ends quickly here, and Kentucky makes it happen. So I have the Cyclones, I have Houston, I have the Terriers, and then I have Big Blue Nation getting through on the bottom part of the pod in the Midwest.
Sweet 16 from the Midwest. Go.
Okay, UNC and Washington. I think Washington is just too limited offensively. They're going to find a way to slow them down offensively in the first half. I think that's going to work. So if you want to look at a first half cover or a first half under, I think that makes sense. But I think that UNC just has too many weapons offensively. I can see Little destroying the middle part of that zone. I could see Cam Johnson getting into the middle part of that zone. I could see Luke May. They have so many weapons that can operate inside the middle of that zone, right where you need to get into the creases and do some damage there. And plus, I'm a huge Kobe White apologist, so I think that he does big things against Noel here. So I'm going to push UNC through. Auburn and Kansas. I think this is where the Kansas ride ends. I'm going to push Auburn through. They're playing unbelievably well. The thing to pay attention about Auburn, not only are they playing unbelievably well, the number of threes that they're shooting is borderline disturbing. We are shooting more threes than Villanova did last year. The number of threes that they're jacking up just in the flow of the offense is something to pay attention to. So even if they hit double digits of them, they're probably going to move on. And I like the senior, the leadership guard play here from Brown and Harper against the Kansas, rookie backcourt. So give me Auburn through there. And as far as Iowa State and Houston, I'm going to go completely irrational here. Now, this is where you want to reflect back upon last year and say like, oh, well, if Poole doesn't make that shot, maybe Houston makes a run to the Final Four and the championship game instead of Michigan. And we're talking about what a great job that Coach Sampson did. And maybe they right that wrong or find some better karma here. I don't think this is the place where they find it, because I think that even though they're really stout defensively, I don't know if they can stop everything. I've talked on the podcast before about how Iowa State is one of those teams where, like, not only does defense and rebounding travels, but if you have that much perimeter talent, that also travels. So I'm going to push the Cyclones through to the Sweet 16. As much as I want to find a spot for our guy Tom Henson and the Wofford Terriers, and I want them to experience snack time, I think Kentucky's just a little too much. We've seen them outclassed a number of different times when they've challenged themselves, whether it be against UNC or Kansas. Listen, this is going to be a great game, and it's going to be the game that everybody's going to pay attention to, and I hope that everybody tunes into, but I'm going to push Kentucky through. So I have UNC, Auburn, the Cyclones, and Kentucky beating our lovely, beloved Wofford Terriers.
Interesting. So no concern with Iowa State with their sort of up and down play. You think they just continue on the high?
Total concern. I'm being completely irrational with that pick. I'm just admitting my irrational thinking. It's one of the places I can't get away from, so I'm sticking with it because I can't get away from it.
You think Wofford covers?
Totally.
Okay.
100%.
Just trying to get a feel on where you're at. Elite Eight, talk to me, Goose.
Okay, UNC Auburn. I think Auburn's going to look in the mirror. They're going to say, look, we're a really great offensive team. And then they're going to look across the floor and they're going to see a better offensive team. I don't think Auburn's going to put the clamps down on UNC and be like, okay, you know what? Let's really lock in defensively here. Like, can you see Okiki doing that? No, I don't think so. So I think if we're going to lean one way here in this particular matchup, I think it's UNC, and I think both teams put up 90 plus. So give me UNC into the Elite Eight in a very high scoring game, very entertaining game, and people are jacking threes and getting offensive rebounds and long rebounds and throwing dunks down on fast breaks. So give me the Tar Heels moving through. And as far as my irrational love for Iowa State and the Cyclones, I think it ends here against Kentucky. And I think Kentucky is one of the more underrated teams in this whole entire bracket because the number 2 seed is next to them. If the number 1 seed was next to them, they would have this odd expectation, and because they have that number 2 seed next to them, they're kind of hiding under the radar, and I think they pop into the Elite Eight, and we get an unbelievable rematch of a couple of years ago when Luke May kind of made his name for himself and hit that shot in that iconic game to get to the Final Four, to get to the Elite Eight with UNC and Kentucky.
And who makes your last Final Four spot between these two blue blood programs?
I'm going against something I went preseason here. I went UNC preseason. I'm going to go Kentucky. The reason I'm going to go Kentucky is because I think that Hagens can actually get in Kobe White's grill. Kobe White is one of my favorite players in the nation. I think he's unbelievably talented. I think he's an unbelievable difference maker. Because he can limit what Kobe White can bring to the table, then we go to the next best player on the floor. And you've championed the next best player on the floor. It's been PJ Washington. The next best player on the floor is PJ Washington. I think he makes the difference here. I think this is one of these iconic games. Maybe we get somebody that makes an iconic shot, just like Luke May did a couple of years ago, and that person lives in March Madness lore. So I'm going to put Kentucky through as my last Final Four prediction in the Midwest.
That was an absolutely spectacular job by you. And because, as you always do, it can happen. What you said can absolutely happen. Let's take a look. I'll break it down for you folks.
Okay.
So Gus has a 12 seed upsetting a 5 in Murray State. Gus has 2 11 seeds upsetting 6 seeds, Belmont continuing the playing game versus Maryland, as well as St. Mary's.
Have to.
Gus has 2 2 seeds getting knocked out before the Sweet 16 in Michigan and Tennessee.
Got to pick one. I picked 2.
Gus knocked 2 1 seeds out before the Final Four. As I said, it's about 1.8-ish, 1.6 since the turn of the century 1 seeds get there, and he has 2, and that's certainly reasonable. And he's got some sort of a blow-up bracket with 4 Virginia Tech and 2 Michigan State, as well as Buffalo getting through, Buffalo-Nevada game. partner, this is a great job. I commend you. This is a very good job. You're not chalky at all. You got Duke getting knocked out. You got some nice upsets. I think you're consistent. There is nothing that you said that I think cannot happen. I think we disagree on a couple, but your arguments are valid. It's not like you're saying, I like Yale because they've locked down the Ivy League. No, you like Yale because they have a pro. They can score. They have a pro and Oni, and they shoot the three, and you think Yale has a fog on them, which all of that is true. Yeah. So you've provided great arguments. Well done. I commend you. Folks, Virginia Tech, number 4 seed in the East. Gonzaga, number 1 seed in the West. UVA, the Tony Bennett Redemption Tour in the South, number 1 seed. And Kentucky over his Tar Heels. I have to tell you, that one surprised me. 2 seed in the Midwest. Gus, great job, buddy.
Listeners, thank you. Thank you for playing along. We hope you find help, some education. I hope that we help you get one of your picks right so you can sound unbelievably smart with your family, with your boys, with your girls, whoever you're talking to. That's all we're trying to provide here. And we just want to say thank you for letting us keep you company in March. This has been an unbelievable pleasure from our end. So thank you from the Screen the Screener podcast to you guys out there. And we hope you enjoy March as much as we do.
Gus today, me tomorrow. Get your popcorn ready. Let's go, folks.
Please give the podcast a follow at SES Podcast, Efficiency of Keystrokes, of course, on Twitter. Please don't forget to give Mike a follow at Randall Rant. He is insightful, educational, and a riot all in one nice, tidy package. You like what you're listening to, or you just want to blow up our picks, please go hit your podcast consumption vehicle, whatever that might be, and leave a nice review. Leave a nice review for some of the guests we've had on. Leave a nice review for some of our picks if we get something right for you. And last, please, enjoy March as much as we do. That's all we're going to ask you to do. Enjoy it right along with us, and thanks for letting us keep you company. Cheers, cilantro, and gratulazia. Catch up with you before you go.
I'm addicted to the appetite.